A place where reality fractures under an unseen weight, Skinwalker Ranch has swallowed entire chapters of truth that no one has ever fully recovered. Why did this patch of Utah desert bend time, twist animals, and stalk those who dared watch the night too closely? What force marked this land long before any rancher ever claimed it? Stay with me, and you will uncover the threads that were never meant to be pulled. Skinwalker Ranch did not begin as a mystery. It became one slowly, violently, and with a precision that felt almost deliberate. When the Gorman family arrived in the early 1990s, they expected acres of quiet land, a place where cattle could graze undisturbed, and the desert nights would be little more than cold and wide. Yet from the moment their truck rolled through the rusted gate, an invisible tension rippled through the air, as if the land itself exhaled in warning. The first sign was subtle, a sense of being watched, not by neighbors or by wildlife, but by something that lingered just beyond the limit of human perception. The family dog, usually fearless, refused to leave the vehicle. It growled low, staring toward a cluster of cottonwood trees that swayed, despite the stillness of the wind. The branches shivered as though touched by fingers they could not see. That night, the cattle refused to gather near the corral. Instead, they clustered together near the center of the field, moving in uneasy circles as if trapped inside an invisible boundary. The father, Tom Gorman, wrote it off as stress from the move. But his wife saw something else, shadows that flickered across the pasture, shadows that did not belong to any animal she knew. When the sun set, the land changed. Light appeared along the tree line, not warm like lanterns, and not sharp like flashlights. These were cold spheres, drifting no higher than a man's chest. They moved with purpose, weaving patterns in the dark, pausing as though inspecting the family from afar. No sound accompanied them. No hum, no footsteps, only the soft crackle of frost forming on the grass around their glow. Hours passed. The lights vanished, and in their place, silence settled, too deep, too total, like the world was holding its breath. By morning, the family found their first true sign that something was wrong. One of the cattle lay rigid in the field, untouched by predators, yet carved with a precision that bordered on surgical. Skin removed in perfect circles, organs missing without a single drop of blood spilled. Even the ground beneath the animal was dry, as if gravity itself had paused during the act. Who or what could perform such a procedure without leaving any trace? How could an animal die without a sound, without a struggle, without any witnesses in the dead of night? Days turned into weeks, and strange patterns emerged. Tracks appeared in the dirt, massive, clawed impressions, far too large to belong to any known creature of the desert. The prints circled the house and vanished abruptly, as if the creature had evaporated into thin air. Lights returned almost nightly. The dogs grew more frantic. The cattle grew more restless. And the Gormans began to question whether they were alone on their own land. But the most disturbing incident came during a routine check of the herd. Tom found several cattle packed tightly into an old trailer that had not been opened in years. The locks were intact. There was no sign of forced entry. And yet the animals stood inside, trembling, eyes wide with a terror that no human could identify. It was as though they had been placed there, deliberately, intelligently, impossibly. Something was studying them. Something was testing boundaries. And the ranch was only beginning to reveal its appetite for fear. Before we move on, make sure you subscribe. This journey into Skinwalker Ranch is only getting darker. And tell me, what do you think forced those cattle into that locked trailer? The second stage of the nightmare began with a sound one so faint and unnatural that the Gormans could never fully describe it. It was not a howl, not a whistle, not the cry of any living thing. It was a resonance, a metallic hum that trembled through the windows and seemed to coil around the rafters of the house like an unseen serpent. It came always after midnight, and always from the same place, the western pasture, where the ground seemed slightly darker than the rest of the ranch, as if scorched by something the earth itself wished to forget. Tom had grown tired of feeling hunted on his own land. One night, clenching a flashlight in one hand and a rifle in the other, he marched out toward the source of the hum. The air changed as he approached. It grew heavy, thicker, as though the atmosphere resisted his presence. His breath came out ragged. The grass seemed to bend away from him rather than toward the wind. Then he saw it. Standing near the fence line was a creature unlike anything he had ever encountered. Tall, emaciated, and disturbingly still. Its limbs were too long, its joints bending at angles that defied biology. Its skin shimmered faintly, as though reflecting light that wasn't there. For a moment, Tom thought it might be an illusion born from sleeplessness, but when he raised his rifle, the creature's head twisted with a slow, deliberate motion. Its eyes, 2 pits darker than midnight, locked onto his. The creature did not run. Instead, it stepped backward, its movements silent, gliding rather than walking. Tom fired. The rifle kicked. The bullet sliced through the night and passed through the creature as if through mist. No impact, no blood, nothing. The figure dissolved into the darkness, leaving only the echo of the hum behind. When he returned to the house, shaken and pale, he found every door wide open. Not forced, not damaged, just open. Perfectly, as though someone had walked calmly through each room, inspecting everything with meticulous curiosity. The children were asleep, untouched, yet their toys had been rearranged into strange geometric shapes on the floor. Triangles, spirals, symbols they had never seen before. His wife, Ellen, insisted they begin documenting every event. But documentation offered no comfort, only proof that something on the ranch operated with intelligence far beyond their understanding. Poltergeist-like phenomena began to spread across the property. Objects vanished, only to reappear miles away. Tools were found stacked in perfect towers, defying balance. Heavy machinery was moved overnight, as if weight meant nothing to the unseen hands that manipulated it. One afternoon, Ellen hung laundry outside when she felt a sudden gust of heat brush past her. Not wind heat, like the air around her had ignited momentarily. She looked up and froze. Above her floated a translucent shape, barely visible except for the distortion it caused, warping the world behind it like liquid glass. The shape hovered, pulsing, before shrinking into a pinpoint and vanishing with a soft crack that rattled her teeth. What kind of intelligence toys with a family instead of attacking them? Why study them with such surgical patience? Why rearrange objects, stalk animals, distort the environment, and then retreat into silence? The answer came weeks later in the most terrifying form yet. A massive wolf-like creature larger than any natural wolf could ever be emerged from the tree line one evening as the family tended their cattle. Its fur was thick, matted, and strangely wet, as though it had just crawled out of a river despite the dry desert. Its eyes glowed with a dull, unnatural intelligence. At first, it approached calmly, almost docile. Tom, stunned by its size and strangely fearless demeanor, did not raise his rifle. Then the creature lunged, not at Tom, but at a calf behind him. Its jaws clamped onto the animal with crushing force. Tom fired at point-blank range, once, twice, 3 times. The creature didn't flinch. Bullets tore through its body as though its flesh were made of smoke and iron at once present, yet impervious. Only after the 7th shot did it pause, release the calf, and slowly step back. It stared at Tom, eyes unblinking, before turning and walking calmly into the brush, leaving no tracks in the dirt behind it. The Gormans knew then that the ranch was not simply haunted, it was inhabited. And whatever lived there was growing bolder. The night after the wolf incident, something new appeared in the sky, an opening, a tear, a glowing slit of light, as if the night itself had been unzipped. What stepped out of it would force the family to face a truth more terrifying than anything they had imagined. The tear in the sky did not open with thunder or flame. It appeared silently, an incision of pale, trembling light carved into the night, stretching slowly from one end of the western ridge to the other. The Gormans watched from their porch, frozen, as the slit widened like the eyelid of something ancient waking from a long, deliberate sleep. The air vibrated with a pressure that made their bones ache. Even the insects fell silent, the entire desert holding still as if awaiting a verdict. Inside the tear, colors churned violet, silver, and a blue so deep it seemed to swallow the very concept of light. Then the colors folded inward and revealed a void, a tunnel whose end none of them could see. The void pulsed once, twice, and something stepped through. At first, it had no shape, only an outline, a silhouette filled with stardust, flickering like static caught in a human form. As it materialized, the outline hardened, revealing a tall figure with elongated limbs and a smooth, featureless face that reflected the desert like polished obsidian. In its chest, where a heart should have been, a sphere of dim light throbbed, synchronized with the pulsing of the tear behind it. The figure stood still, studying the ranch with a tilt of its head. Every instinct in Tom's body told him to run, yet he couldn't force his legs to move. Neither could Ellen. Their children trembled behind them, unable to cry, as though fear itself had stolen sound from their throats. Then the creature raised one arm, and the world changed. A wave of distortion rippled across the ground, bending the grass, warping the air, causing the fences to twist like soft metal. The cattle bellowed in agony, collapsing onto their knees, their bodies trembling as though struck by an invisible current. Tom shouted, but his voice came out warped, pitched strangely low, as if the air refused to carry his words correctly. The figure lowered its arm, and the distortion paused. Not stopped, paused, like a command waiting for new instruction. Ellen felt her mind being pulled, gently at first, then violently. Thoughts she had never spoken seemed to lift into the air, drifting toward the creature like smoke. Memories blurred. Her vision doubled, then inverted, showing her the ranch upside down, while her body remained upright. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her head, unable to stop it. The creature turned its featureless face toward her. Tom ran at it foolish, desperate. The moment his foot crossed the shadow cast by the figure, he froze mid-step, suspended, weightless, frozen in place like an insect trapped in resin. Panic flared in his eyes, but his body was no longer his to command. The creature examined him, head tilting again with a strange, almost childlike curiosity. Then it reached out not physically, but with a ripple in the air, a vibration that struck Tom's suspended form and sent small arcs of light skittering across his body like lightning trapped beneath skin. He did not scream. He could not. The tear behind the creature widened further, its edges fraying like fabric, pulled too tight. The void pulsed faster. The creature responded, raising its arm toward the sky. From within the tear, shapes moved, several, shifting, drifting, as if waiting for a signal to cross into the world. And something unexpected happened. A beam of bright orange light shot up from the southern field, striking the tear with enough force to make the entire ranch tremble. The creature jerked its head toward the source. The tear flickered, destabilized, shrinking slightly as if threatened by the sudden interference. Another beam fired, then another. Machines massive, silent, triangular crafts hovered above the southern ridge, their lights piercing the dark, converging on the tear like predators challenging a rival. The figure on the ground recoiled, its body glitching, edges flickering as if caught between dimensions. Ellen fell to her knees. Tom dropped out of his suspension, collapsing in the dirt, gasping for air as if he had been drowning. The tear shook violently. The figures inside it retreated. One last pulse surged outward, flattening the grass for several meters in every direction, and then the tier snapped shut. The figure vanished. Silence reclaimed the ranch, but the Gormans knew nothing had ended. Someone or something else was watching the ranch now, and whatever had closed that tier was no savior. It was another force with its own agenda. And the next encounter would reveal a truth far darker than anything the family had imagined, if they survived long enough to witness it. When the tier in the sky sealed shut, the ranch did not return to normal. It transformed into something worse, an observatory, caught between two predators. The Gormans sensed it immediately. The air no longer held the sharp, electric tension of the entities that had stepped through the glowing slit. Instead, a colder, more calculated presence settled over the land, watching from angles the human mind was never meant to register. For the next several nights, no lights drifted through the fields. No unnatural creatures stalked the cattle. No strange distortions warped the fences. But the silence was an illusion, a thin veneer stretched across a truth that pulsed beneath the soil. The dogs refused to leave the porch. The cattle clustered tightly, their fear palpable. Even the insect creatures that had survived countless cycles of the desert seemed to abandon the ranch entirely. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a conflict far older than the Gorman family. Tom stayed awake through each night, gripping his rifle even though he knew it offered no real protection. Sleep came in fragments, shattered by faint vibrations that trembled through the walls, through the water in their glasses, through their bones. Ellen heard clicks beneath the floorboards, rhythmic and intelligent. The children reported whispers coming from their closet soft, at first, then louder, speaking in a language that didn't belong to any world they knew. On the fourth night after the tier incident, the machines returned. They did not announce themselves with sound. Ellen noticed them only because the stars vanished, one cluster, then another snuffed out as if swallowed by massive, invisible shapes. When her eyes adjusted, she saw their outlines. Triangular crafts, each the size of a house, gliding just above the treetops. They made no sound, no wind, no heat. They drifted with deliberate, predatory patience toward the western ridge, where the tier had once opened. Tom rushed outside, shouting for his family to stay inside. But the moment he stepped onto the porch, he felt pressure clamp around his skull sharp, directional, controlling. It forced him to silence, forced him to stillness. One of the crafts rotated, a slow, impossible movement for an object of such size, aligning itself directly above him. A beam of pale, amber light descended, engulfing him from head to toe. His vision blurred. His ears rang. His thoughts stuttered, trapped between memories and unfamiliar images that flickered like broken film reels in his mind. He saw the ranch from above seen through an inhuman perspective. He saw the tier reopening in other timelines, other years, other shapes of reality. He saw the obsidian-faced entity waiting in its own dimension, patient and unblinking. He saw the triangular machines watching it, hunting it. And then he saw something far worse. The ranch was not a battleground. It was a trap. A fixed point where two forces intersected, one that could tear holes in reality, and another that could seal them shut. The Gormans were never the target. They were collateral. When the light released him, Tom collapsed into the dirt, gasping. The craft drifted on, unconcerned with his survival. It joined the others near the ridge, where the ground began to vibrate in deep, resonant pulses. It was the same hum they had heard before, but amplified, distorted, stretched into frequencies that rattled the windows and made the cattle scream. Then the earth split. Not like an earthquake, this was precise, intentional. A straight line opened across the soil, glowing with the same violet and silver hues that had filled the tier in the sky. But this opening did not rise upward. It sank downward, as if something beneath the ranch was awakening. The triangular crafts circled the fissure, beams triangulating in patterns that repeated every few seconds, as though performing a ritual or attempting to stabilize whatever lay below. Ellen dragged Tom back inside, her hands shaking, her breath frantic. The children watched from the window as the light intensified, bleeding across the landscape like a second sunrise. Then, without warning, the lights shut off. The fissure closed. The crafts vanished, simply gone, as if erased from existence. Silence returned, but this time it was not empty. It was waiting, because something beneath Skinwalker Ranch had stirred, and the next night would show the Gormans exactly what had been living under their feet all along. The night after the ground sealed itself shut, the ranch felt wounded. The soil held a faint tremor, a heartbeat just beneath the surface, as though something enormous had shifted in its sleep. The Gormans did not speak about it. They didn't need to. Every breath they took carried the metallic taste of dread. Every shadow felt heavier than the night before. The triangular crafts had vanished, but their absence felt more dangerous than their presence. Whatever they had been trying to contain, now it was awake. The first sign came just after sunset. The sky dimmed too quickly, as if an unseen hand dragged the evening down like a heavy curtain. The stars flickered and stabilized, but their light seemed weaker, swallowed by an invisible haze. Tom walked the perimeter fence, clutching his flashlight, aware that all illusions of safety had evaporated. His boots crunched in the dirt until suddenly they didn't. The ground beneath him vibrated with a low, pulsing rhythm, like a drumbeat, felt rather than heard. He knelt, pressing his hand to the earth. It was warm. And then something answered his touch. A ripple shot outward from his palm, distorting the soil in a perfect circle that spread across the field before fading into nothingness. Tom jerked his hand back, heart pounding. The earth responded again, this time unprovoked. A second ripple, then a third. Something beneath him was mapping his location, learning him. He ran. Inside the house, Ellen was pacing, her breath sharp, her nerves frayed by the sounds coming through the wall soft, clicking pulses that shifted from one side of the room to the other, as though something crawled just behind the drywall. The children sat huddled together on the couch, too terrified even to speak. A thin line of dust fell from the ceiling as a slow vibration traveled across the rafters. Then every light in the house flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the room. A faint glow blossomed beneath the floorboards, violet and blue, the same unnatural colors that had bled from the tear in the sky. The glow pulsed, illuminating the knots in the wood, the trembling hands of the children, the widening terror in Ellen's eyes. She backed away as the glow brightened, outlining a shape moving beneath the house. A large shape. A deliberate shape. Something that was not crawling, but sliding. Tom burst through the door just as the floorboards began to warp upward, bulging as if something was pushing from below. He grabbed his family, ushering them toward the back door, but an unseen force slammed it shut. The house groaned, every wall expanding and contracting, breathing like an enormous lung. The air thickened, humming with a resonance that made their bones vibrate. Then the floor split. Not in a straight line, not like the precise fissure of the night before. This rupture spiraled outward in a tight, impossible pattern, forming a symbol none of them recognized. The boards snapped upward, and from the exposed dirt rose nothing visible. Yet the shape of something massive pressed against the surface of reality, distorting it like heat above a fire. The unseen mass slithered upward, bending the air, making the room twist in ways that defied architecture. The windows bowed inward, glass trembling, frames bending. The children screamed as the distortion coalesced into a towering silhouette, featureless, yet unmistakably aware of them. It leaned forward, its outline shifting like liquid shadow. A single low-frequency tone emanated from it, a trembling note that shook the lamps, the walls, their teeth. Then, a second tone higher, sharper answered from outside the house. Something else had arrived. The distortion inside froze. The tones clashed low, and high vibrations fighting for dominance. The walls quivered. The symbol in the floor glowed brighter, searing through the wood, cracking deep into the foundation. Outside, a blinding beam of amber light shot down from above, piercing the house, illuminating the featureless silhouette. The entity convulsed, its form glitching, tearing, fragmenting into shards of warped reality. It flickered like broken reflections. The beam intensified. The silhouette shrieked without sound, and in an instant it collapsed inward, folding out of existence like a collapsing dimension. The beam vanished. Silence returned, but not relief, because the Gormans realized the truth they had never dared to consider. There were not two forces battling for the ranch. There were three, and the most dangerous one had just revealed itself. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. Things are about to spiral into territory almost no witness has survived to describe. And tell me, what do you think that third force really is? The third force announced itself not with lights, not with distortion, but with a pressure so deep and ancient that the ranch itself seemed to recoil. The wind died. The insects that had dared return vanished again in an instant. Even the stars dimmed, as if pulled behind a veil. The Gormans stood in the ruins of their living room, the air still buzzing from the amber beam that had erased the shadow creature. But this new presence felt different, older, heavier, bound not by physics or time as humans understood them. It began with a smell, a faint metallic scent like wet iron mixed with charred earth, drifted through the cracks in the walls. Tom felt it first, a sting in his sinuses, a burn spreading across his tongue. Ellen felt her throat tighten, as if some invisible dust coated the air. The children clutched their ears as a low vibration passed through the house, so deep it felt like the heartbeat of the land itself. Then the foundations groaned, not because something moved beneath them. This time, something moved through them. The walls bent inward, not from force, but from gravity itself, wrinkling like cloth being twisted by unseen hands. The house trembled violently, and every window shattered in perfect unison, glass spraying outward rather than inward, as though fleeing the presence that approached. Tom dragged his family into the yard, only to freeze in place. A ground across the western pasture was rising. Not cracking, not splitting, rising, swelling upward as though some colossal shape beneath it were pushing the entire field toward the sky. The soil bulged in concentric rings, each pulse lifting it higher. The cattle fled in frenzied panic, only to fall suddenly silent as the bulge reached its peak. Then the mound collapsed inward. A circular cavity opened in the earth, wider than a barn, impossibly smooth, lit from within by a pale, pulsing glow. It was not a tunnel. It was not a fissure. It was an entrance, a perfect sphere carved into the land by something with surgical precision. And from that glowing hole, the third force emerged. It had no shape at first, only a distortion, a shimmering density in the air like gravity folding in on itself. The temperature plummeted, frost forming instantly across the grass, despite the heat of the day lingering in the soil. The distortion expanded, rising, twisting, condensing into something vaguely humanoid, tall, impossibly tall, its limbs elongated not by anatomy, but by gravitational fields bending around it. Its surface was not skin. It resembled the event horizon of a black hole, constantly warping, pulling light into itself. The creature's core pulsed with a dim crimson glow that flickered like a dying star. The influence of this being was immediate. Tom felt his blood pressure spike, his vision tunnel, his breath shorten. Ellen fell to her knees as the gravity around them thickened. The children clung to each other, unable to cry. The entity took a single step forward. The ground cratered beneath its feet. Grass turned to ash in a perfect ring around its form. Stones vibrated into dust. Time itself seemed to slow, the night stretching into a painful, suspended moment. Tom tried to shield his family, though the instinct felt primal and hopeless. The being wasn't just powerful, it was fundamental, woven into the fabric of forces humans weren't meant to perceive. Then the triangular crafts returned. They didn't glide across the sky this time. They tore into it. 3 dark shapes ripped through the atmosphere, their amber lights flashing in defensive patterns. The crafts formed a triangular formation above the gravitational entity, beams dropping from their undersides, not to attack, but to contain. The beams bent unnaturally, curving as though afraid to touch the creature directly. The ground beneath the entity pulsed in response, cracking outward in a perfect spiral. The being raised its arm. The sky warped. The triangular crafts shuddered violently, their beams snapping like broken tendrils. One craft folded in on itself, collapsing into a pinpoint of light before winking out of existence. Another was thrown sideways, crashing silently into the eastern ridge, disappearing behind the trees. Only the third remained, fighting desperately to stabilize the field around the entity. Tom realized then this third force was not protecting the ranch, nor hunting the other beings. It was the origin, the tier in the sky, the creatures that stepped through it, the machines that tried to contain them. Everything led back to this ancient intelligence buried beneath Skinwalker Ranch. The entity turned its featureless head toward the Gormans. The crimson glow at its core brightened. Gravity tightened around them like a tightening fist. Just as Tom felt his bones begin to crack, the sky above them split open, not like the first tier, not linear or controlled, but a violent, chaotic rift that screamed with distortion. A blinding torrent of violet light poured through it, engulfing the pasture, swallowing the entity, the remaining craft, and finally the ranch itself. The Gormans felt the world break apart around them, felt the land twist, fold, and collapse into a blinding void. Then everything went dark. No bodies were ever recovered. No traces of the house, the machines, or the phenomenon remained. Only scorched earth, a perfect circle burned into the land. And to this day, investigators swear the soil still vibrates. A heartbeat waiting,